Welcome back for another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. I want you to think about the last time that you arrived to a meeting, sat down for an appointment, and realized that the person sitting across from you had not prepared. They weren't ready. Whether it's they had no idea what you were talking about that day, they hadn't reviewed their notes, didn't know where you were headed, didn't have resources they needed, they weren't prepared. What did that communicate to you? I know we spend a lot of time in meetings, whether it's professional meetings or even in our personal life. If you think about a doctor's appointment as a meeting, we spend a lot of time having appointments with other people, pre-scheduled time. There's something we need to do in order to prepare effectively for those appointments. So today's episode is entitled Preparation is Leadership, Why Winging It Won't Work. And it is a solo episode today. I just want to give some feedback on some things I've seen recently and hopefully give you some things to reflect on that we should be thinking about as we prepare for upcoming appointments on our calendar. So this first kind of came to my attention recently because I have some family members that are having a lot of doctor appointments. And after they had gone to their first set of doctor appointments, they had sent in their, charts a couple of weeks early. They called back to make sure that they had the charts in advance, and all the records from, other, imaging and appointments. But upon arrival and sitting down at this new doctor's office for the first time, the doctor comes in and said that they haven't had a chance to review their chart. So there's a lot of information that the doctor needed because this included lots of different testing, imaging, hospital stays, multiple hospital stays, lots of information, and the doctor is sitting in front of them just quickly skimming, picking out some keywords, and it becomes very evident very quickly that the doctor hasn't even grasped the order in which events have occurred or what information they needed to know in order to actually help in the appointment. So after that was shared with me and there was this pattern over and over again of, okay, new doctor, same situation. I'm walking in, they don't know who I am. They don't know why I'm there. They're just asking me instead of looking at my chart. What's the point of sending this stuff in advance if they're not preparing? I don't feel like I am getting as much out of the appointment because we're spending what little time we have trying to tell them the things that were already in the records. So I know that that's not just a doctor situation. It happens all the time. I will say a place that doesn't happen is while we're talking about healthcare is if you see Kelly Bada at Smarty Pants Medicine. That has never been the experience. She is always well prepared. She gives you plenty of time. You feel heard. You feel valued. And that's what makes that experience so different. But why is it now standard practice to feel like you're going to have limited time and the person's not going to come prepared knowing anything? So it's like, what can I do to get the information to this person as quickly as possible so the time isn't being filled up, giving them information they should already know? Same thing with meetings, right? Oftentimes, I hope that there is an agenda for a meeting that you're going to have, and you would like to think that people are going to come prepared to talk about the things on the agenda, bring the proper resources, whatever it may be. But it's not happening. So the bigger picture here is that when someone doesn't prepare, it immediately makes you feel some way, right? And it connects to a previous episode that I recorded. If you go back, an episode talking about when you try to communicate with someone and they don't respond in a timely manner. How does that make you feel? It makes you feel like you're undervalued. In this case, if someone's not prepared, do they respect you? Do they respect your time? Time is extremely valuable. We have limited amounts of it and have to be very intentional about how we choose to spend it. So, what is that saying about the way in which they value you and your time if they're showing up to an appointment that you had on the calendar, not prepared to have the conversation that you are to be having? So, you're not a priority to them. That's the message that's being received. You're just the next item on their list. So it doesn't matter if it's healthcare, if it's a business meeting, if it's a conversation. Maybe it's not an official meeting. Maybe there aren't a bunch of people sitting around the table, but you know that you're supposed to be having a conversation and you haven't really stopped to reflect on what you need to say in that conversation. So these are the things that's communicating. I don't respect your time. I can wing this because you're not important enough for me to actually take time to prepare for. And it's telling the person that you're just not reliable. If you're not preparing for this, what else are you not preparing for? And if this is what you go through to prepare for a meeting, what does your follow through look like after a meeting? Are you going to do any of the things that we agree upon as far as action items go? So I know that, I serve on boards, I'm in BNI, I'm a member of lots of different groups, attend lots of different meetings, and it's always approached very differently. Sometimes we have a very formal agenda, specific amounts of time for each. My goodness, that's my favorite, is if you can go into a meeting and you have an allotted amount of time for each topic, and it's very clear if you're coming to this meeting to make a decision or to inform a group of people about something. What is the purpose of this? What do you need to bring along with you to prepare? The more information on that agenda, the better. And then you properly prepare for the meeting because you've received it well in advance and you know what to expect. There are some meetings that I know I go to that people aren't going to have an agenda for. Maybe it's not even a meeting that I'm going to host, but I still make sure that I sit down and properly prepare. What questions do I have? What topics do I want to make sure we cover? What might they need to be asking me for them to have the information they need to be able to move forward? So thinking through all the parts, even if it's not your meeting that you're facilitating, can be helpful when you haven't already received an agenda. Think about how that makes you look when you're showing up more prepared for a meeting than the person is who might be facilitating it and really taking ownership of that meeting. So I just really want to talk about why preparation matters. Obviously, we need to kind of close the loop on communication in general, and I've talked about that in previous episodes, but I've never really focused in on what happens up front prior to a meeting, and it's just been brought to my attention a lot recently. So really, what you do in preparation for a meeting sets the tone for the entire relationship, especially if it's your first time meeting the person, because people are deciding if they can trust you, if you're reliable within the first few minutes of meeting you. So let's say I'm having a one-to-one with someone for the first time. If I show up to that one-to-one and I'm just all over the place, it's clear that I don't have a vision for the conversation. It's not like I haven't prepared questions, things I want to know about the person. What does that look like to them? But instead, if I show up and say, I took some time to review your profile. These are some things I learned about you. I noticed this. I have questions about that. Oh my goodness, what message is that sending? Sierra cares about me. She cared enough to take the time to go look at my profile, go learn more about me, establish some questions that she had so we can make the most of our time together. So again, this sets the tone for the relationship moving forward versus me showing up with no clear plan and depending on the other person to really lead the conversation. Well, what if they're not someone that feels comfortable naturally leading a conversation? So they were coming ready to depend on me, and we're both sitting there spinning our wheels and feel like it was a waste of time after 30 minutes. So something to consider there. For leaders, your preparation for meetings, you are modeling this for your team. So think about the model and what your team is going to do based on what they're seeing you do. And if you're coming unprepared to meetings, are they going to prepare for meetings? Do they think it's important if that's what you're showing them? So I just really want you to actually think about, maybe there's a meeting that stands out to you. Let's look at 2 examples. One where you've shown up and the meeting just seemed to flow so naturally. You usually know when it's one of these. You get to the end of it and you're like, wow, time flew. That was great. I know exactly where I'm headed from here, what to do next. Awesome. Versus a meeting where you walk away like, what just happened to me? Like, did you get anything out of that? Was that helpful to you at all? Actually, I feel like I'm more unclear than I was when I walked into the meeting. So think about an example of each of those in your life and the difference between the two. How prepared were you for each of those meetings? Again, even if you're not the one that's supposed to be facilitating it, if you've thought in advance about what you could expect to do there, you might be someone who can step up and help guide the conversation and move it forward in a, positive direction and productive place than, just sitting back and waiting and saying, the person that was supposed to be facilitating wasn't ready. So I want to give some ideas of what you could be doing in order to make sure you're properly prepared for meetings. This might seem obvious, but it isn't necessarily to everyone, and it comes down to the calendar. Our calendars are filled with meetings, but you shouldn't just block meeting time. You should block prep time. Now, personally, I do not like blocking prep time directly before the meeting, because there is no backup plan. So if I have a 1-hour meeting and I block 30 minutes before it to prep for that meeting, there's no backup plan if something happens and an emergency occurs, whatever it is, takes up those 30 minutes. Now I'm not prepped for the meeting. So those people that are close and in my circle and kind of in my accountability group know that I always prep at least 24 hours in advance of a meeting, because if something were to occur, I have a buffer. I still end up having time between now and that appointment to prepare. My clients, my expectation is for coaching prep forms. They're due to me no later than 24 hours before an appointment, because that is to give me adequate time to prepare. I do not want to be preparing the same day as an appointment. So think about, for every meeting you have, how much time do you need to have set aside to properly prepare for that meeting and block that time? So that is why we should have these very focused admin times blocked out on our calendar to make sure we have built-in prep. So if you're not doing that now, take a peek at your calendar and really start to pay attention to how long does it take to prepare for this type of meeting, and when might I set aside that time, hopefully not the day of, in order to have proper prep and a buffer. So something else that I think you need to do is make sure that you're doing your homework prior to the meeting. And that's going to look different based on the type of meeting you're having. So I started off with an example of a doctor. If you're a doctor, you're going to read the chart, right? You're going to get to know what has been happening in your patient's life prior to the appointment so that you can come in with the background knowledge and problem solve. For me, as a coach, I look at the past 2 appointments that I've had with a client. What were the patterns? What were the trends? What did we talk about? What were their action items? Did they follow through last time? What were their action items from last time that I need to be checking in on this time? What key challenges keep popping up for them? What did they identify in their prep form as their outcomes they're intending for that session itself? All of this goes into prepping for a client meeting. So it's really important to me that I have enough time set aside to go through that and refresh my memory and kind of get the full picture before going into the appointment. If I were to just show up to an appointment, I didn't expect a client prep form. I just showed up and said, hey, how's it been going? What do you want to talk about today? that is not going to get the most out of our time together. That means that they might ask a question that I could have prepared resources for and come to the table and said, here, it's perfect. I have it right here. Let me show it to you. This is how you use it. I don't have time to do that now. Maybe there was stuff from their past that I needed to look at and reference, and I haven't had time to do that. Maybe they're asking me something that I have absolutely no idea about, and I was going to seek guidance from someone else I collaborate with and do an introduction, and they could already have their answers. So that is not a good use of my time, and it's not a good use of their time. So I make sure that I'm reviewing my notes. That goes for any leader having a one-on-one conversation with someone. Review your notes from the last time you met, which means you have to keep track of your notes. So we should have a system for that. For me, it's in my Remarkable. I also record different types of meetings, not all meetings. I'm very careful about which ones I record, but my client meetings, I record on Otter AI. That way I have a full transcript, I have my summary, and I have the action items from the previous time. It makes it super easy for me to go back and review and make sure that I know where we left off. So again, look back before you look forward. And if it's someone new, do your research. If you've never met with the person before, go to their LinkedIn. When it's BNI for me, I go to their BNI profile. I look at their gains profile and read their goals, their achievements, what their interests are, who their networks are. All of these things I'm looking at to better understand them so I can go into the meeting and know exactly. Oh, and S is skills, by the way. Gains, there's an S. I know what I want to ask them, what new information I want to learn, not that we're using the meeting now for them to just go straight through the information I could have read in advance. So just another example there. So what are you doing based on the meeting you're going to have? And then anticipate needs. What questions might the other person have? If I were them, what would I want me to bring to the meeting? And I think this maybe became a part of my process because as a teacher, I constantly had to think through what misconceptions there might be with a skill set, with something that the students are learning, what additional questions might they have. So I kind of had to be proactive and think that through. So now I do that all the time with everything. Like, what is this person going to ask? What are they going to wonder? What are they going to want? What resources? So try to anticipate needs and come prepared with the things that the other individual might request. Prepare your own questions. That doesn't have to just be a high C behavior. Be curious, prepare the questions, have them written down in advance, and really be clear in what a successful meeting looks like for you. I like to define success in the meeting up front. And that's why I like clear priorities from my coaching clients, because it is clear by the end of this meeting, we hope to achieve blank, right? And you understand that and I understand that. So now we're giving each other permission. If we go down a rabbit hole, we need to pull each other back in because we've agreed upon this as the outcome for today's meeting. And that can be hard sometimes because people do want to go down rabbit holes, and you have to decide, is what we're talking about now more important than what we set as our intention for today? But if you can get on the same page as to what a successful meeting looks like, it makes it a lot easier to prepare for that as well. I find that if a team can agree upon an agenda in advance that you always use for a meeting, it makes it so much easier to prepare for a meeting and to know what to expect and to stay on time. I think that meetings in which, like BNI, for example, where we rate how successful we were at the end of the meeting, so we give the meeting a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, that is an awesome check-in to see, okay, the majority of us are saying 8s and 9s here, but this person said 7. Why did you give this meeting a 7? oh, it's because not everybody was prepared today. What can we do differently next time to make this meeting an 8 for you or a 9 for you? And it really allows you to drill down into what can we be doing differently and how does this person define a successful meeting? So every time you kind of use that system and you get on the same page, you get closer to knowing what you need to be able to have done in advance to access that meeting and be fully prepared and use people's time wisely. So just something to think about too, if you can get everyone on the same page as far as a meeting agenda. Oh my goodness, now I know what I need to do to prepare. I go back to this document from last time and it told me exactly my action steps, and I have my agenda for this time, and I know exactly what I'm responsible to bring to the table and speak about. So also very important. I think it's important to respect the unseen work. So it might not always be evident because we're moving so quickly at all times. It's kind of invisible. But the planning and prep that goes into a meeting, you don't know how long that person might have taken. Maybe I take too long sometimes, to be completely honest. But to me, I'd rather be overprepared than underprepared, so I'm not going to apologize for that. But you don't know how long it took. But the absence of preparation is glaring. If someone shows up and hasn't done anything, doesn't even know what to expect, and can contribute nothing of value to the meeting, that's pretty darn obvious. So we want to make sure that you are giving it adequate attention, and people start to see a pattern of, when Sierra comes to a meeting, she's showing up prepared, has what she needs. It's evident that she's thought about this, and this isn't the first time in the last month she's thought about what she's doing on this board. So really think about, though the work might be invisible, it might not appear that they appreciate it or understand how much effort you're putting into it. It really does stand out when you haven't properly prepared. So just other things to think about in relation to this, just first impressions. This goes for any general meeting, but also if you think about an interview, you want to properly prepare for an interview. We put so much effort into, being prepared to answer what questions they have, but also having our own to show that we care and we want to learn more. Why wouldn't we put that same level of effort into other types of meetings in our lives? We also want to make sure we're prepared beyond just for meetings, but prepared for any events in life. If you're going on a trip, how are you properly preparing? Are you waiting until the last second before you walk out the door to throw stuff in a bag? Or have you been thinking about it a week in advance and in order to make it less stressful and actually an enjoyable trip, what you need to do to properly prepare? This summit is a perfect example. We've had a timeline and list of responsibilities since day one, and we've tried to map it out over the course of, I don't know what it's been. It's been since April. Map it out over the course of time and take one step in the right direction every day. That's going to get me much better results than scrambling at the last minute. So preparing for anything in life, family events, things you're volunteering for, vacations, it's so much less stressful if you're doing intentional prep. And beyond the prep I mentioned before is the follow through. To me, it's like a big cycle, right? So the prep leads to the meeting, which leads to the follow through, which leads to prep again. So if you are not properly tying up the loose ends after the meeting, then you're not prepared for the next one. So I actually used to have issues with this because I would get off a call and I would schedule myself back to back, go right into the next client, and I did not have any time to process. I didn't have time to write down any additional notes, write down my vision for the next session, anything that was important to me. I would just zoom into the next session, which I had prepared for. But I was coming back later, whether it was a day later, a couple days later, and I had forgotten some of that key information that was important to me. And I didn't feel like I was tying up the loose ends close enough to the meeting for me to be sure that I was capturing all the important information. Now, AI has certainly helped because now I have transcripts and summaries and all of that. I still don't like to depend on it. I like to have a 15-minute buffer between the meetings, and that 15 minutes is intentionally to set myself up for next time. So, for example, at the end of Aspire to Achieve, when my clients say, for the next 30 days, this is what I'm working on, by the time we get to our next meeting, you can expect that I've completed this. I go ahead after that meeting and I create the agenda for next month's meeting, and I go ahead and input what things I'm checking in on for each person, because it is so rewarding when I go to get set up for the next month's meeting and I click and I already have my agenda filled out, and all I have to do is decide what the growth tip of the month is and what the icebreaker is. But I already have that part filled in. I don't have to go back and what did they commit to doing? It's already there. So what I'm trying to say is the follow-up can take place right after the meeting so that you're set up for prep for next time. So prep, engage, follow up, and just kind of follow the cycle. So close the loop. I hear this from my clients all the time, that they feel like their employees aren't closing the loop on things, that it's becoming more and more of a challenge where it's like, something hangs out there and they're like, why is that still hanging out there? And they just never did that last little step. That's the thing here. Make sure that you see it through to the end so that you're properly prepared for that next meeting. I did mention it is possible, I guess, to over-prepare. I don't think it's that bad. I guess if you're spending so much time that you're thinking about things that never come up in a meeting and it ends up being a waste of time, okay, maybe that's a little overkill. Just you don't want to end up over analyzing and having analysis paralysis and wasting time. That defeats the purpose of this. It's just, the goal isn't to know everything, be prepared for everything. It's just be ready for what matters most, and show that you care. All of these things are really a reflection of who you are as a leader. It goes back to the episode that I did with Tammy Swankowski about your identity, your brand. This is a part of it. How you show up, how well you are prepared for any encounter with someone else really is a reflection of who you are as a leader. So hopefully that's helpful to get you reflecting on how you're showing up, if you're doing proper preparation, and how you can set aside time to do so. I want to dig into leadership in the wild and identify someone that I've seen leading well in the last week or so. So I want to point out Brady Cook. So Brady is a young man who owns Valley Vending here in the Valley. He also works at First Bank. He noticed a problem recently, and it is that when Cynthia Schneider, the CEO of Top of Virginia Regional Chamber, is at an event and is speaking, people are being disrespectful and continue to talk. Let me tell you, it is very challenging, especially as a teacher, to watch people continue talking when someone, is speaking. And I know that I've addressed the whole group about it before and people didn't love me for it, but it's really important. It's unprofessional for you to keep talking when someone is standing at a microphone. And I think we should know that. But anyway, not the point. Brady noticed a pattern. When Cynthia speaks, people keep talking. She's having to do clapping routines and shout at them, and other people are having to whistle to get attention. He showed up to First Bank for business after hours this week, and he brought a mic and speaker system, a very well-functioning mic and speaker system, so that she had something to be loud enough to be heard over the people that are continuing to talk and be disrespectful. And it was awesome because he didn't ask any questions. He just saw a need and fulfilled that need. And I love that. I think Brady's really good at that. He did the same thing with my summit. He knew that the summit is a lot of work and reached out to me and asked if he could volunteer the day of, what could he do to help? So he's working backstage in the crew for the summit, which is amazing. So, when Brady sees a need, he goes into problem solving mode and fulfills that need. And so this is a shout out to Brady. Thank you. Thank you for noticing that Cynthia needed that the chamber needed that, and for stepping up and trying to solve that problem. The next segment that I always do is Leadership Unscripted. For those that haven't listened before, this is a listener submitted challenge, leadership question that they're looking for feedback on. So this week, and this is anonymous, so we're just going to come up with a name. This week we have, oh my goodness, William. William says, most days I feel like I'm absolutely drowning in meetings. From the moment my calendar starts until the end of the day, I'm stuck reacting to everyone else's priorities. By the time the meetings are over, I haven't touched the projects that actually matter to me. How am I ever supposed to get anything done? I wonder how many people can relate to that. That's something I hear all the time. We do have too many meetings, for sure. Number one, I would say audit your calendar and really filter your meetings considering, does this meeting need me? Can someone else represent me? Do I need this information at all? Is this a meeting I'm coming to inform? Am I supposed to be in the room to help make a decision? And really use that information to decide whether or not you need to be in the room. I've definitely talked to some people about this before where they're like, oh, I don't think it's going to go over well if I say I don't need to be in this meeting. Well, honestly, there are so many tools now that it's totally possible to just say, you know what, I don't think that when I've been coming to the meetings that it's the best use of my time. However, if you want to record the meeting and send the transcript my way, feel free to tag me in anything that you're assigning me or anything that you feel that I need to know, and I can go back and listen to the recording and pull the information that I need. But save yourself that time. I would advocate for not being at a meeting that you don't need to be in. So if you really ruthlessly audit your calendar, there are probably some things that could be removed and really streamlined so that you're not spending as much time in meetings. Also, do you have any influence on the meeting culture in the organization? Are you having 60-minute meetings that could be reduced to 20-minute meetings? Is it a 30-minute meeting that can be a 10-minute check-in? Are they currently daily meetings, daily huddles that could be now switched to once a week or twice a week? Like, really look at what is the meeting culture? How do we determine how much time we need for a meeting? Are we truly, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, creating an agenda and being clear in the amount of time it should take and keeping people on task so it's the best use of everyone's time. So what does that look like in your organization, and can you modify it? Can you reduce the amount of time in meetings? And if you're feeling like you probably don't have to be in all the meetings, there are probably other people in the room that feel the same way too. So really consider each meeting and who needs to be on that calendar invite versus who gets the notes, the minutes after the meeting. Maybe also the part that you said about stuck reacting to everyone else's priorities. I'm assuming you mean that outside of the meetings, reacting to other people's priorities. I would say that I'd want to be transparent that you want to be available to people, but you also have your own projects to get done. So you are blocking out specific time on your calendar for deep focus time, for project time, for whatever you want to call it, where it is a do not disturb time for you. And anytime outside of that window that people are welcome to interrupt you and ask questions, whatever they need, but really sharing that you want to be available, but you also have projects that you need to move forward. and just be clear in, when is an appropriate time, what is an emergency where you can really interrupt my deep focus time versus keeping a list of things that during my next, open office hours time or whatever, that you can bring to me so I can answer all your questions at once. But just being clear in that, and just really, I want to go back to the alternative of just really respecting your own schedule when it comes to blocking your time for yourself, but also being able to say no and present an alternative solution of, no, I'm not going to be able to make this meeting. However, please send the notes afterward. I'd love to see a summary of what decisions were made, or whatever it may be. You can do a no but alternative. If someone's inviting you to a meeting that you don't feel like is the best use of your time. We do have tons of tools out there to help make the most of it now. So hopefully that's helpful to you, William. William, I believe, is the name that I chose. But it's very common. People feel like their calendar is just absolutely packed. So, when am I to get things done? It's kind of like I used to feel as a teacher, we would have planning time, but during the planning time, we would have team meetings. But then I felt like, okay, the planning time I ended up having to do at night and on the weekends because I was in meetings, which they were totally valuable in making some decisions as a team. But there were a lot of things that, they're being individualized based on your class. And, we couldn't do that during that time. So just some things to think about there. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so for the branching out challenge, I always want to end with that. What do I want listeners to do based on today's episode? My hope is that you start to really look at how you're preparing for any appointments that you have and consider, are you setting aside enough time to give it the attention it deserves so you show up and show the person that you care about them, that you respect their time and their needs. It really does help you to be more effective as a leader. And I think you'll feel better going into a meeting when you're prepared instead of scrambling and winging it and hoping that you're not put on the spot when you're not prepared. So hopefully you do some reflection on that. If you're not setting aside appropriate time now, I really recommend setting aside time at least 24 hours before. If you can get to a point where you're a couple of days ahead, looking ahead, that's even better. But you have to start somewhere. So I hope you found value in today's episode. If you did, please share it with someone else. Maybe someone that hasn't been coming prepared to meetings. No, I'm just kidding. Don't actually send it directly to them. But share it with your team, maybe, and make sure everybody is on the same page and knows what's expected and what a successful appointment looks like. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to go to branchingoutpodcast.com and complete an application. If you want to submit a scenario like William, feel free to shoot an email over to info@branchingoutpodcast.com, and we will be happy to help provide some ideas to overcome your challenges. If you have not subscribed to Branching Out, I would love for you to do so. You get those notifications every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time when another episode is dropped. I know we have a lot going on, so I know those notifications are helpful. It's my podcast, and I don't even remember that it has gone out until I see my notification that it's popped up. So that's something I have to do every week, and I still forget. So I'm sure that the notifications are helpful for listeners too. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. And until next time, keep branching out.